right there was the summer of 2024. For me, this series of building confidence probably could have started and ended with Red October baits. It was something I was always aware of within the musky industry, but it never really hit my radar hard until the last 2 or 3 years. And even though I fished with guys like Michael Grant, who was a very early adopter of the Red October tube, he got a lot of them straight from Marc, my guest tonight, and I'd seen them in action. I was still reluctant, like a lot of people were with those, the tube early on. Marc, welcome to 54 Minutes with one of my favorite bait builders, Marc Arena from Red October Baits.
Hey, Glenn, thanks for having me.
It's like I just said, it probably doing this series of talks where I talk about building confidence with certain baits. This is probably the one that was the most obvious for me because we always had Red October baits. We used pretty much all of them at one time or another over the past probably 5 or 8 years and had some success with them. But it wasn't until the last few years that we really built that confidence up with them. What was it like when you guys started the idea of making a musky size tube bait? Because I got to imagine back when you guys started, there wasn't a lot like that.
Yeah, well, your story really parallels a lot of anglers who used our products. I think it's a bit of an acquired taste, the tube, but it seems to be pretty well received once you've got your mind wrapped around how you might want to use it. And I think that's really the trickiest part to making it. I guess you would call it a mainstream lure at this point. After 20 years of plodding through, some ups and downs, it really is a testament, I think, to the curiosity of anglers, the intuitiveness of anglers, and just trying to come to grips with, how can I use this tool effectively for my particular situation and setting. And we actually started the business, myself, Hans Mann, and Josh Ketry, the original owners. I think it was like 2004 that we started kicking this thing around. And really, it wasn't even a business idea. It was really a tool that we were using on the Niagara River was a Lindy Tiger tube, which was, a smaller version, but larger than any other tubes that were on the market at that point. And we were dragging those along the bottom of the Niagara River in really heavy current and having amazing success. And as sometimes happens with a lot of great fishing lures that, well, in certain people's minds, they might be great fishing lures. They go missing from the shelves, and you search high and low to try to find them. You go to eBay, and, I think we've all done those things to try to find that special lure. And it became apparent that those tiger tubes were becoming less and less available. So that was the impetus for, well, how do we make large tubes ourselves? So we actually started off with the 10-inch, and then went backwards down to the 7.5, and then up to 12s, and then did the twisted tubes and the boot tubes and whatnot. But really, it was I guess the saying is necessity is the mother of all invention, and we had this need to get tube jigs based on the Niagara River bite that we had really keyed in on.
That's interesting. I think I seen one of the very early DVDs where Hans was fishing with Greg Thomas, I believe. I don't know if that was filmed on the Niagara, but it was certainly a jigging situation. And I remember seeing that pretty early on, and I was intrigued by it. But living up in Sunset Country on the Shield Lakes, that wasn't really something that I was aware that many guys were doing. I know a few of the Lake of the Woods guys were doing it on some of the heavy current areas there. That goes back to Michael Grant and Heinrich Beer. And it was something that once we got them, we started using it like a Bondy, the original Bondies, and now I have a ton of confidence doing that, and I think a lot of anglers do. But early on, there had to be some rejection to using a musky bait in that style. I have to think those first couple shows that you guys did, was it a hard sell?
Yeah, we didn't do much selling. We gave a lot away, but we knew. I think it really, Glenn, it comes down to like we knew what we had. Um, it was a matter of just getting it into enough people's hands, that critical mass, and that we knew it would do what it's done. Particularly in the last 5 years. But um, yeah, those early days, we were in an unpaid booth out in the hallways at Harper College at Chicago. Um, we we would one of our main tactics was to scoop the kids' attention, and then the parents would follow, primarily the dads. And the way we did that is we set up a whole wall of pictures for the kids to play this little game. Like we'd say, hey, out of these three fish, which one do you think is 48 inches long? And, they'd get it wrong the first guess, and we'd guess again, whatever. And we'd give them a free tube. Eventually, everybody got one, eventually they get it right. So, and then, you do that for 2 or 3 kids, and, you get a little bit of a crowd. And then the dads are like, well, what do we do with these? So then we had 3 different rig designs that we had come up with, and we could go into our little spiel about how versatile a jig is. A tube jig is essentially just like any other jig. You can really fish it in a lot of different ways. So yeah, we would get this crowd, and Hans was really excellent at kind of cultivating that scene. He's got a great personality and gregarious guy. So it was kind of a labor of love there. The first 2 years we were relegated out into that hallway, or maybe even 3 years. I think we did that until we got the invite to get into the main room.
That's some interesting business tactics there, but that certainly works. And I know some of my friends that own lodges up here that go to like the All Canada shows. It's all about that connection with people. You're not really selling, in their case, the lodge. It's about building a human connection, getting those people into your booth, and letting that kind of come organically. And it works so well with kids. When I'm at the wife's sports shop in the summer, I'll help out on Fridays or Saturdays when it's really busy and doing licenses and stuff. And when kids come in, and especially if they know who we are, they'll ask questions. And I have no problem paying for a lure off the wall if the kid is really interested. And I think that's twofold, right? You're getting kids interested in lures, and tubes are one of those things. They're touchy feely. Kids love that
Yeah.
stuff. And
Oh
let's
yeah.
face it, anglers do too. You guys put that table together,
Yeah.
and it's so ironic now that you guys are in the hallway as an afterthought, and now you guys have one of the front and center booths at every show with that table of lures that every angler probably just is envious of. And a few years ago, you posted a picture and I posted a picture of all mine, and I have like a quarter of what you guys have at the show, and it's still a gluttonous amount, but everybody loves those things. And it's such a lure that you can just quickly change colors, change tubes, change sizes. I don't know if you guys went into it with the idea of we need to be as versatile as we can, or was that just a byproduct of the fishing and the testing?
I think the versatility part really struck me early on, because I happen to be using those Lindy Tiger tubes for casting as well. They came with like a pretty light jig head inside of them. Like when we were using them for drifting in the Niagara, we were putting in our own jig heads. A local fella, Joe Wilshevsky, Jig and Joe, some of you guys might know on the internet there. Um, he provided us with the jig heads that allowed us to fish those things so deep. But yeah, the versatility piece was pretty apparent early on, and the iterations of the different rigs over the years, and we need to revamp that, I think, currently. But um, it's been fun getting a lot of ideas from different guys, how they use them, what they'd like to use them for if they haven't already. Having those conversations is key to building out that product line. But that versatility piece, I think, is it really is probably the number one feature of a tube jig. You know, the hollow body style allows you to do so much. And I think that's so attractive to us as anglers to be able to connect with our lure, not only our lure choice and our color choice, but now you're talking about like the guts of the lure, how to manipulate its action based upon what you're putting inside of it, tail blades you're attaching to the front or the back. And it really speaks to us as anglers as we catch fish on something that we've had a little more hand in manipulating, not maybe just the color, but actually how it functions. And I think that's been a huge draw. One of the key factors over the last 5 to 10 years in this growth that we've seen has been that particular aspect.
I would certainly echo that, and a lot of the great tube users, guys like Doug Wegner, he's posted how he modifies his tubes. I did a video last year on how we modify them, which is very similar, obviously, but there's a lot you can do with that harness. And actually, off air, I have an idea that I want to run by you on a style of
Sure.
head that I think would really fit our area. But the interesting thing with, just say, the 10-inch monster tube is that when people pick it up off the shelf, they're a little underwhelmed. And as soon as they put it in the water, they're even more underwhelmed because it doesn't look like it does much. I just
You know
have
what
to
I
be
call
honest
that?
there.
I gotta tell you, we call that the wet sock syndrome. That's what that is.
What did Greg Thomas tell me when we were fishing together? A waterlogged cigar, I think he called it. But what people have to get by is that initial, oh, this doesn't look like it's doing much. It's not the actual, just the look of the tube. It's what it's doing in the water. And we did a video last year. We filmed it underwater and we captured some audio of that hollow body going sucking water
Mhm.
in as it moves. And I don't know that anybody had ever really truly captured that on video. And when I look back
No.
at the footage, I was like, holy shit, like there's something
Yeah.
happening here. And we really isolated it. And I know that's key to that style of lure. And it makes sense that that hollow body is going to squish, very similar to a Shadzilla with that hollow body. It just has a
Mhm.
different sound and vibration in the water. So I think that is key with the Red Octobers. And one thing I do want to touch on with the harnesses, and I'm sure you guys are pretty consistent on harness, building, but it's like any other bait. You'll get one that just works perfect. And I really find, especially with the 7.5-inch ninjas, when you get that tube matched with the right harness, and it almost acts like a jerk bait, glide bait. Like it'll just, you can do so much with it. Sometimes you have to go through a few of them to get that right one, but there is some magic in that. And the fact that each tube is slightly different, you might have slightly different, not really thickness of rubber, but just that you see guys, and I see it at the show, especially guys like the caliber of a Doug Wagner or some of the other top guys. They'll grab a bait and they'll feel it and they'll touch it and they're like, yeah, this one feels like it's like the right softness or the right thickness. And we seen Doug do that at Lake X with a fat bastard, listening to it as he spins it. So we're the same way. I'll go through the tubes and I'm like, this one feels a little bit, too nose heavy, or the tails are too heavy. And that's micro adjustments, but when you get those right ones, it really does make a difference. For you guys, Mark, what's been the best sellers over the years? Has that changed over time?
It has. It's interesting. I will say in terms of colors, like we're all color freaks in our own right. We all seek, what we think is going to be the best color, and we all have different opinions on that. But I think black and white remain our two, pretty much our two top selling colors. That table that you mentioned earlier at the shows, I always put a big heaping pile of 10-inch black and 10-inch white right in the center of the table and put all the fancy stuff all around it. Well, that center of that table is always hollowed out, always. It doesn't seem like I can't put enough there. I think this year I had like 50. I think I had 25 blacks and 25 whites just sitting in a pile. And they were at Chicago. I think they were gone within like 5 hours. Those two colors always seem to really really sell very well. So I would say um, most recently, the hybrid rig has been very popular. The last season for sure, maybe a little bit the season before, but last season, prior to that, that mid depth rig in the 10-inch tube has been just, I mean, overwhelmingly above everything else we sell. But last year, I think the hybrid rig took a little bit of uh, that market space up. In particular with the tail blade, that seems like that hybrid rig with the tail blade uh, has been it's been great in that I think it fishes a zone, a depth zone that a lot of guys will utilize it. You know, that hybrid rig, you can fish anywhere from about 5 to maybe 12 feet down, and um, you get a lot more hang time when you got that blade on the end, but you can still achieve those depths. So, you know, as opposed to the shallow rig, which is really very specific. I mean, that is top couple of feet. You know, I don't fish it much at all, to be perfectly honest. But that's primarily because of where I fish. But that's, you know, top 3, 4, 5 feet. And, you know, obviously if you're up in skinny water, that's going to do the trick, but you could pull that same thing off with a hybrid rig. And then you could also fish that down 10 or 12 feet down. So I think that's why that hybrid rig is really taken off, because it's kind of filled a niche that a lot of guys were looking for. You know, with the explosion of that mid-depth rig, people fishing anywhere from like 10 to 25 feet of water with that mid-depth rig. Um, People were kind of looking for something in between that shallow and the mid. You know, you could fish that shallow a lot slower and get it down into that 8 to 10 foot zone, or you could fish the mid depths wicked fast and beat yourself up all day trying to keep it up in that 8 to 10 feet of water. So that hybrid rig has kind of filled that gap. I think that makes it a little more comfortable to fish. So that one has been, at least in the last 12 to 18 months, has been the one that's kind of risen up, along with that tail blade combo. Seems to be very popular, and that tail blade's been popular on the mid depth rig for a long time as well.
Yeah, that's obviously one of the most popular mods that guys do. I admittedly don't really use the hybrid rig a lot because we fish a lot of deeper water. Where
Mm-hmm.
I find that I will change in skinnier water, maybe the edge of weeds or in some weeds or above, you know, that 3 to 4 foot deep top of a reef, I'll go down to a mid depth ninja tube and I
Yeah,
literally keep my rod tip up and just rip it across the top. And again, if you get the right rig, you can really get it to dance. And I made
yeah.
a 7.5 Ninja with twin blades on the back, and that really slows that fall down. I'm able to
Mm-hmm.
keep it up high and get a lot of action out of it. Think of maybe like running a Medusa, those hard rips, or
Mm-hmm.
running a Suick where you're running it a little bit faster over the top of stuff. But it again, it just goes to the versatility of what you can do with these baits. It literally there's nothing you can do. And when we were just down at the Milwaukee show here in February with you guys, and we are hanging out in the booth, and it's so interesting to me that people in today's world are coming to your booth and they're like, "How do we use these?" And I we get trapped inside of the industry and we think everybody's
Yeah,
as hooked up or linked in or whatever you want to call it with everything that's going on. And there's a lot of just casual anglers are not. They come to these shows or maybe they watch a video and hey, that's interesting. I want to get one of those. I get probably asked once a week, you know, how do you build your rig and what do you use? What's your favorite size of lure? Blah blah blah. And I tell a lot of people if I was going to pick one lure to fish from spring till fall, a 10-inch monster tube, I could get it done. I'm sure I could fish all summer with that. You know, you'd leave some fish on the table in certain situations, but
sure.
I feel like I could get it done. And when you tell people that, they give you that little, you know, that sideways dog face, like, huh? Like what? And
Yeah,
it goes back to the confidence. And it's the type of bait that when you do catch a couple fish on a tube, and it's even for like the bass guys or the walleye guys, when you're fishing a tube and you get strikes on it, they're hard, they're aggressive, they're fast, and that's exactly how muskies hit these things. Like They don't just come and nibble and touch the
Yeah.
tail blade. They hammer these things. And I find the hookup percentage is really, really high. Is that something that you find as well, Mark, that like across the board, when you do get a strike, like the hookup percentage is pretty high?
Yeah, I think for guys who are using longer, more powerful rods, and more importantly to me is the amount of line pickup. You got to have a high speed retrieve reel to keep up with that cadence that because you're creating slack with every twitch of that tube, and almost almost every bite you get is on the pause, like
Yeah.
on that intermediate, like when you're loading up to get your next twitch, you'll feel and if you haven't picked up enough line, and I think some people do struggle actually with the hookups with the tubes, and this is the part that I try to explain to them. And I want to go back to what you were saying about some of the newer anglers at the shows. I really still feel like that face-to-face time that we spend at the shows is just invaluable. We have so many people just still learning, and it's going to be like that forever. You're always going to have new anglers to the sport, but that is one of the key ideas that I often stress with people, and it's usually the guys who I've talked to the year before, and they came back and they're like, I got bit a few times, and I wasn't able to hook up. What am I doing wrong? And my first instinct is to ask them about their equipment and making sure that they have a high-speed retrieve reel that they're going to be able to catch up and get as much slack out of the line so that they can really have a true hook set and not have 18, 24 inches of slack line involved in that hook set. So I think there's some people that might be listening to this hookup idea and being like, no way, I'm horrible at hooking up on the tubes, because I hear that often. I really do think that it's more of a product of the equipment and understanding what's going on when you're working that tube with that slack line being built into all of the motions that you're making with those tubes. So yeah, that to me and for me, like, the hookups are fantastic at this point. And we also switched to using BKKs this season almost fully exclusively. There you may find some lures this year that come out with some of those Eagle Claws still, which are good lures, and we use mustads as well. But we're trying to go exclusively with those BKKs, and those are just a dynamite hook. I like the short shank, round bend, wide gap trebles like that have been really solid in terms of hookups and staying pinned. So hopefully those make a difference for some anglers too this year.
Yeah, so I do want to apologize on the fact that I said the hookup percentage is really high. It's really high for us. Early on, it wasn't because of
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. We were letting the fish touch the bait, and then we were trying to slam it home super quick. I think of it almost as a top water hit. You have to let the fish pull a little bit away from you before you set in. It's that slight momentary, let it hit it. They hit it hard, but a lot of times if you have a tube, and I got a bottle of water here, I'll just kind of show. So if this is the front of the tube and the fish comes up and it hits it, the hook might be hanging right here and it might not have it. You have to let it kind of grab it, start to move with it, and then set the hook in. And I think a lot of beginners, and even that I see in my boat, as soon as they feel any pressure, they just set right away, and it's almost too quick. And I think it becomes second nature with any type of lure that you have a lot of success with. A Suick's another one. You have to kind of give it that split second for them to really have it. You can't just set as soon as you feel just that initial, touch of the lure. But the BKK thing, I think I had asked you over the course of last spring. I got a few rigs from Jeff at Team Rhino, and I was like, oh, they got BKKs. This is interesting. And you had said you were switching over. What size hooks do you send with the rigs? And the reason I ask is I updated some of the rigs I have, and I put 5/0 BKKs. And the way we set them up, we have the hook hanging underneath. I put a hook right at the start of the tails, another
Mhm.
treble at the back, and then obviously that upturned hook, because in Ontario we're allowed to have four hooks with a maximum of 3 points per hook. And I did find the 5/0 BKKs in that configuration can get a little bit heavy, and they do affect the way the lure has attitude in the water just based
Yeah.
on the rig. So I was just curious, what size are you
Yeah,
sending them with?
that's really interesting that you said that, because that is really why we don't utilize the fives. I like the size of the fives on the 10-inch tubes, but I do think the weight of those fives does impact the tube. And it might be negligible in some circumstances if you're already fishing like a mid-depth rig, but the shallow or the hybrid maybe impacting your ability to get the lure to behave the way that you want. Because the more weight you have, on the back end or underneath, it's going to deaden the action of that tube. So we rig all the 10s and the 7.5s with the 4/0, and then our 12-inch tubes we rig with the 5/0s. The 4/0s they're just about, in terms of the gap, they're just about the same as those old Eagle Claws that we use, which are really a nice hook. But I like that shorter shank, in that round bend, in terms of really establishing good hook penetration. It seems to be, and they're just razor sharp. I mean, those things are. It's pretty common in our shop to hear people kind of blurt out, "Oh shit, damn it!" While they're rigging tubes up, people end up bleeding a single night. So yeah, those hooks have been a good thing and a bad thing at
Yeah,
the same time.
we've switched over a lot of our stuff to the BKKs because of that. They're very robust. I love the round bend on them. I like the short shank, and they are literally razor sharp. So that is a nice upgrade for sure. Um, before I let you go, I do want to get a sense of when things were starting to pick up for you guys. I know things were going good because it was you guys were in the magazines, the start of social media, we started to see people catching on it. And then from my perspective, it seemed like in the maybe the 2015s to the 2018s, it seemed like Red October wasn't on the tip of everybody's tongue. And then just prior to COVID and through COVID, it seems like they've just absolutely exploded. It's almost like you guys are a new phenomenon. Am I imagining that, or is that somewhat real?
I think that's somewhat real, and I think back to, it's funny because I think back to Bulldogs, um, kind of going through that same pattern, and I remember using Bulldogs and just having great success, and then it was like they kind of faded for like a season or two, maybe just out of my consciousness, I don't know, and then it was just a massive explosion. And in a certain degree, that's happened with our baits. I can tell you kind of behind the scenes what was going on. Um, we had a good cadre of really elite anglers who were just crushing tournaments. And this was going on probably in those years you mentioned, 2015 to 2018. And of course, nobody wanted to, mum's the word. Like, you're winning tournaments on these things. Now, of course, I know this is going on. They're all calling me, texting me, and unbeknownst to them, I'm getting calls and texts from the same guys they're competing against, and they're all hush hush. So I don't say a word. I just kind of take it in. But it was interesting that over that stretch of time, I think that tournament scene really solidified in some top-notch anglers, like just how great they are. And that took a few years then to translate into the public realm, by design. Guys aren't going to be out there shouting from the rooftops, "Hey, I won a tournament on a Red October baits. I won this one, I won that one." But I was getting those messages often. So you can only keep those things bottled up for so long. And I think that's what we saw going back maybe 6, 7 years now. That public awareness really ramped up, and it was just, it's been lights out ever since. And I got to thank all of my retailers like sticking with us. I mean, we've had certain retailers for almost, I guess we're going on 20 years. And they went through the ups and downs with us, but they stuck it out. And our customer base in general, that's the one thing I will say, we just have a tremendous customer base. And I think that really, again, speaks to being able to communicate with a lot of people early on and just kind of talking through what they wanted from our products and trying to incorporate their needs and their wants into what we were producing, whether it was rigs or colors or the thickness of the baits or different sizes. Um, we have a customer base that just they stick with us through thick and thin, and and a lot of the guides and the I guess what you would call the professional anglers in the muskie world. I mean, going all the way back to Pete Mena, in 2005, he walked back by the booth out when we were in the hallway in Chicago, sat there and chatted for 15, 20 minutes, looking at it the whole time, looking at the rigs, thinking about it. So we gave him a pile. Fast forward a year or two later, and he's got us on ESPN Outdoors. And same thing, like Greg Thomas was another guy very early on. Matt Rayleigh and Nate Osfar, these guys, and then you got so many like Mark Lajewski, just like incredible tournament angler. I mean, there's a lot of names I'm not going to say right now that I could tell you that these guys are just all phenomenal anglers. Mike Grant and Heinrich, like there's tons of those stories that kind of was the building blocks and gave us the confidence, to keep going. Building a company as any of the soft plastic or hard bait guys you have on, they'll all tell you the same thing. It's not easy, man. Like you bust your tail, and you need that feedback. You need that from everyday anglers, but also all those pro staff or elite type anglers. And now you mentioned Doug Wegner earlier. I mean, phenomenal anglers like that. Like these guys, they give you the confidence to keep going, the motivation to keep going, and because you always run into stumbling blocks. I mean, it's not easy figuring out how to mass produce items once you kind of catch on. It's a pain in the butt, man. It's not easy, but it's and stuff like you do, like you guys as well, like the social media aspect of things. Being able to come on a show like this and just kind of talk it through, it actually kind of solidifies in my mind, like, how did I get here? Like, it helps me process it as well. So, and this community is fantastic. The muskie world it's a tight knit world. And we're always, getting, I think, newcomers to this game. And that's really where I focus a lot of the energy now, is trying to capture the attention of newer anglers and get them on board with something that I know in my heart will help them catch muskies.
Yeah. I'll say one thing, Mark. It's a testament to how much you guys have put in. When I see you at Odyssey last year or Milwaukee this year, and you're still talking new anglers through how to use your product, and you can see it in your face that it's not old yet. You haven't lost that little sparkle. Like you say, deep down that if somebody can buy a tube and put the effort in, they will catch a fish. And for guys like myself, for the influence we have, all we can do is show people what it is we're capable of with your product. And if that helps, one person buy a Red October tube, I consider, our job well done. But it's working together. And you're right, the guys that are tube users are fanatics, and I know a lot of them that they would defend the Red October tube to their death, because it's one of those lures that it is transcending just that hardcore muskie group. It's a lure that everybody can use once they
Yeah.
get their hands on it. It doesn't take anything real
No.
special. If you've ever went bass fishing with your dad or your grandpa and he put a tube on, you can use a Red October tube. So I just want to say thanks for all the support, Mark. I know you got to go. I want to have you on again because I think the behind the scenes history of the business and the ups and downs is interesting as well. But for us at 54 Bus, I just want to say thank you so much for all your support for what we do and the custom colors and stuff. That's fun. On a personal level, it feels good to be a part of something interesting and cool. So again, thank you so much for that. And I would be totally remiss if I didn't ask, how is Hans doing with his health battles?
He's doing great. We just had a fundraiser maybe about a week and a half ago or so, and it was just a packed house, unbelievably packed house. So many people showed up. People drove in from out of town, people from Ohio and Pennsylvania and beyond. And we had so much support at the shows. I want to say thank you to everybody who donated. We collected just oodles and oodles of stuff. I think we ended up with 150 raffle baskets. It was just an immense event. His sister Liesel and our good friend Josh Ketry, they really did a fantastic job putting the event together. And it was, I think, anybody who was there, was probably one of the most fun benefits. Hans came up to me right in the beginning. He's like, "Well, welcome to the most awkward night of my life." He's not a guy who would really ask for anything, and we've been out there asking on his behalf, and he does appreciate it so much. And he's got a big surgery coming up in the fall that's gonna keep him down for a bit, and that's what this was all about, is making sure his family was taken care of and his mind could be just focused on his own health and recovery. So yeah, the event was fantastic, and right now he's doing pretty solid, and just looking forward to that surgery come fall.
That is amazing. We met him at Odyssey with you guys last year, and he's exactly as advertised. He's a big
Yeah.
character, and he's so well liked within the Musky community. So when you do talk to him, give him all our best wishes from 54 Bus and myself, because we need guys like him in this industry. So we're all praying for a speedy recovery from this. And again, Mark, I just want to say thank you for coming on, and I will tell all the viewers, if you have not tried a Red October tube, you owe it to yourself to pick one up. Don't worry about the fact that it looks like a wet sock in the water. Give it a little bit of time. You can find so much information online about how to use these, how to rig them if you want to change it a bit, but you don't have to do anything special. Just pick up a 10-inch Red October monster tube, get it in black or white, and just fish it right out of the package. Put a split ring on it. Otherwise, you're going to curse Mark, because that little tie-in ring's really tight.
It is.
And and you guys will have success on the water. I guarantee if you put a little bit of time in, you will build confidence exactly like I have. Mark, thank you so much.
Okay, Glenn, it was great talking to you.
Take
All right,
care.
you too.